In this video, I'm going to show a brief review of the recommended workflow for ordering labs, diagnostic imaging, and procedures. eClinicalWorks does have multiple ways to do this, but some workflows are better than others. We will also review the appropriate place for a provider or a medical assistant to write any information that needs to be conveyed to the performing location for the procedure being ordered. In this case, we have a fake patient, one of my favorite X-Men, and we've given him a couple of diagnoses, and I've ordered a few different tests on him, and I'm going to open the treatment window so we can review them. As always, it's recommended to have the assessment in place before you start making orders. You can do it the reverse way, but it's a little bit more time consuming and takes more clicks. I've ordered this. I'm on chest pain, and you can see that I've ordered an MRI of the chest and an X-ray of the chest. I chose this because X-rays are something that we do in-house, whereas MRIs are not. After I've ordered these, notice that they are both assigned to chest pain because that's the one that I had selected. Whenever you order any diagnostic image of any kind, whether we perform it at Granger or whether you're sending it out, you need to put a clinical scenario for the radiologists. To do so, you can click the ellipsis button. In this case, it's for the chest X-ray, and I'm going to write some clinical info. Now in this case, notice I've written it in the clinical information box. This is because this is the clinical information for this patient. It helps the radiologist know what I'm worried about or what I'm looking for. There are these other boxes for notes and internal notes. Generally speaking, internal notes are only for those messages or information that may need to be conveyed to the ordering staff or your medical assistant. For example, if the patient works the swing shift and doesn't want to be called before 11 o'clock in the morning, you would want to put that in internal notes because it's not really part of the record, but it could be helpful information. The final note section here, I wouldn't put anything in because this is where you can later write your interpretation or agreement with whatever the radiologist said. I'm going to save it, and it saves the information. Now I'm also going to do the same thing for the MRI of the chest. I click on the ellipsis. And I'm going to put my information here as well. Again, the same things that I just said apply for the notes and internal notes in pretty much all of this video today. I'm going to click Save. Now, at Granger, we have a bidirectional interface with the radiologist for our plain film X-rays, our CT scans, as well as ultrasounds. So, if it is a plain film or a CT scan, you need to mark yes, because this is going to be read by Utah Imaging Associates, the radiologists who read our films. If it's going somewhere else, which I'll show you in a minute, and it's not going to be read by these radiologists, and it's not going directly over the interface, then you would select no. You need to be aware that if you don't select anything and just click OK or cancel or X to make the window go away, it will default to yes. So be aware of that. In this case, I'm going to mark yes because the X-ray is going to be read by the radiologist. Now, similarly, I'm going to go order an EKG on the procedure section. This would be if I don't perform EKGs in my office and I'm sending them perhaps to the cardiologist down the hall or the hospital outpatient lab across the street where I need to order it and I'm going to send it out. So again, I can browse to it. I've already ordered the EKG, and here I could put the details, which I've already written in here. Finally, I'm going to go back to labs, and in this case I ordered the labs under bruising. I've ordered a CBC, a complete blood count, because he's bruising. Now, with our lab situation, all of our labs transmit directly over the interface to our in-house lab. What that means is, unlike diagnostic imaging or procedures, you don't have to write anything in this clinical information box. You can, but if you're just ordering your typical CBC and there's nothing special about it, you don't have to put anything there. However, if you're ordering something and you explicitly want a phone call back from the lab as soon as it's done, or you want it immediately sent to the reference lab and not run here, that is where you would put specific information. Our laboratory has a two-step process where the phlebotomist, when they draw the lab, will check specifically for this clinical information, and then a follow-up where after the lab is completed, the technologist who ran the lab will circle back with the phlebotomist to make sure that the clinical info was addressed, that the provider got their call back or it went to a send out or wherever it needed to go. But the distinction here is, if you're just ordering a regular lab without any particular instructions for our Granger lab, you don't have to put any clinical information here. Now, if it seems like I'm laboring the point, I will show you why. We're now back here. We've got our CBC here. We've got our others ordered under the chest pain. And now let us assume that I'm going to order this MRI and I'm going to have this done at an imaging center across the street. It's not connected with us and I need to fax or print the requisition. I'm going to go down here. Now for this video I'm actually going to choose fax rather than print because I just want to show the requisition. I don't want to actually print it. So I'm going to choose fax diagnostic imaging. Now in this case, notice I'm going to uncheck X-ray because we do those in-house. I just need to do this for the MRI. Notice what happens when I click this. It has in the middle window the fax, and this is what's going to be sent, and that's great. The problem is the diagnostic imaging requisitions do not show the clinical information. So the information we wrote in there, it's still there. It's saved as part of the patient. It does not print out on the requisition, and this is a problem. I don't know why eClinicalWorks did it this way, but this is how it is. So in this case, if I'm sending it across the way, the radiologist, I'm sure, would like to know why I'm doing this. They need some information, and unfortunately the clinical information box won't show it. So this is the process instead. I'm going to go back like I'm faxing the diagnostic imaging, and now I uncheck the one I don't want. In the comment section, I can now write what I have in mind. And I can write whatever I want here. The thing to keep in mind is the comments don't save anywhere in the patient's chart. They just show that one time that you print or fax the requisition. So now that I have it, when you look here, again, the requisition is the same, but now the comments are here. So, to clarify, if you are ordering radiology studies that are being done outside of our clinic and you're sending or faxing the requisition, you need to use the comments section to add the clinical information, because unfortunately the clinical information ordered within eClinical itself does not display. If you're ordering an X-ray or a CT scan that's performed here at our clinic and is ordered over the interface, the clinical information box I showed earlier works just fine. Now, similarly, I'm going to show you on the EKG. Let's fax the procedure. I have to select it. For reasons unclear to me, this one's not often checked by default, and I don't know why. Here I'm going to add some comments like we did on the MRI. And again, the same thing applies. This is going to show up on the order, but it's not saved anywhere in the patient's chart otherwise. You'd have to write it each time if you were going to fax it more than once. I click OK. Notice here is the fax requisition form that can be printed or faxed. It shows what I want. It shows the assessment. These instructions don't come from anything that I have written. These come from when the administrator originally sets up a procedure. So they're not really helpful. They're not customizable on a per patient basis. But here are the comments. So this is the recommended workflow for a procedure that you're ordering and sending out. This would not be the case for a procedure that you were sending, rather that you were doing in-house yourself, or even a procedure that you were sending over to another specialist within our clinic, because they have the entire eClinicalWorks medical record and they can get all of your information there. Finally, I'm going to show you on the CBC. We typically don't print laboratory requisitions as a provider or an MA because it transmits electronically over the interface straight to our lab. But if you were sending a patient to have this done elsewhere, perhaps the hospital across the street after hours, and you want to print it, the process is similar. I'm going to choose fax labs, again because I just want to demonstrate what it will look like. Here's my order, and I could select or unselect the ones that I want. There are comments here, so similar to what we've done in the last two examples, you could add comments. However, The requisition for labs is the best formatted requisition in my opinion. As you scroll down, notice here's the lab, the CBC that I want, the reason I'm doing it, and look, here's the clinical information. So in this case, the clinical information does pull on the requisition for labs. It does not pull over from the clinical information to the requisition for diagnostic imaging or procedures. I don't understand why this is. It's an inconsistency and I think a poor design that eClinicalWorks has. But from a practical consideration, this is the workflow that we've devised. So again, to recap, when you have ordered multiple studies to be done, if you are sending them out, meaning outside of our clinic, to be performed elsewhere and you need to print the requisition, if it's a laboratory, all you have to do is put the clinical information in the same place that we always recommend. If it's a diagnostic image or procedure, we still would like you to put it in clinical information for consistency's sake, but if you're printing it, you will need to add the same information to the comments field before you print it. And once again, this is a good time to remind you, nearly anything that you're printing in eClinicalWorks can also be faxed. So if you or your MA find that you are going to an order and you're printing an order out, and then you're walking over to the fax machine and then faxing it, and then either shredding the order or tossing it in the scan area so that it can be scanned into the chart, you're creating a lot more work and a lot of extra paperwork in addition. Rather, anywhere that you see a print button, there's almost always a little green caret which has fax. So anything that you're doing a print, walkover, fax, shred, always look for the fax option, because once you fax it, it's done, it's recorded, and you're finished. That's it for the demonstration today. I realize that a lot of this was very specific for our clinic and the setup that we have, but some of the information I think is generalizable, and it gives an overview of what does show up and what does not, unfortunately, show up in the different requisitions for ordering studies in eClinicalWorks. Please let me know if this is unclear and add a comment below if needed.